Welcome back to the Charter Podcast, brought to you by St. Xavier University. On this New Year's Day edition, I am Ruthie Polinsky with my pal Clay Harbor, who I haven't seen in far too long because we haven't been getting to do our, what's it called? The Big Pro Football Show on Chicago Sports Network. Clay, Happy New Year to you. Are you hungover today? How are you feeling?
You know, I had a couple tequila sodas, Ruthie, to celebrate with some friends. But surprisingly, I woke up feeling great. And as you know, as an aging man, like I'm almost 40, right? You know, you don't expect that to happen, but I'm actually feeling good. So morale's high over here. I'm in New York City. Took a trip out here to hang out with some friends, and excited to get back to the Big Pro Football Show tomorrow. But we got a lot to cover today, too.
A lot to cover today. You'll be proud of me, Clay. I started the new year on a good foot. I did a 90-minute Orange Theory class at 8 a.m. this morning.
Oh, my gosh. I didn't get my workout in yet. Yeah. I got to go after this. Now that I heard that, I can't let you outpace me to start the year.
2025 off to a strong start for Ruthie Polinsky. I stayed up till midnight, but I was like on the couch in bed early. Like I didn't do anything last night. So that's my telltale sign that I'm getting older too.
Oh, that's fun.
Clay, we'll do a little bit of a modified show. No Alex with us. So we'll wait for him to do another coach profile, but we're still going to talk about the coaching search. So we'll do a little vibe check in on a few things. And then at the end of the episode, I want to get your New Year's resolution for the Chicago Bears in 2025. What's going to happen in 2025? So let's start this thing off with a little vibe check. Let's start with your vibe check, Clay, on the coaching search right now.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Obviously, the guy in everybody's mouths, and obviously you saw the game on the most recent game, is Ben Johnson. I mean, just his creativity, what he's able to do. And you've been hearing Albert Breer say that he's linked to Chicago. He has interest in the job. So obviously that's the name at the top of everybody's list. I mean, this guy's had top offenses the past 3 years, and he's just shown consistently that he knows how to run an offense. And for the Bears fans, it's all we care about right now, right, is Caleb Williams. I think we do got to take a holistic view on that and not just think of it as in terms of offense, because obviously he doesn't have the offensive line he has in Detroit, doesn't have the run game he has in Detroit. Those are big things. And obviously you got a lot of cap space. Maybe he could bring in some of his own players. But then obviously what it comes down to is how is he going to work with Ryan Poles, right? Because he's got to have the same vision as Poles as far as how you build the roster, how you build this offense, how you want to build the team. So Ben Johnson is still number one. And then I've been opening up to Mike Vrabel a little more. You know, first I'm like defensive head coach, but he's a guy that's going to come in with accountability, with discipline. You hear A.J. Brown talk about this guy when he was in Tennessee, just how disciplined everything was. And there's something to be said for that. It's like when I spent my time in New England. Everybody's in meetings 5 minutes early. When the coach talks, you are listening. I've been on the other side of it with Gus Bradley, kind of a lax environment. For a young team, you need to have that disciplinarian. And the thing I really like about Vrabel, just doing more research on him, is that this last year, when he was with Cleveland, he was working with the offensive line. He's coached tight ends. So this guy is a coach on both sides of the ball. He knows offense and he knows defense. He's won a Super Bowl as a player. He's played in those big games. The guy is a winner. He has a winning record as head coach. What was it, 54-45 in Tennessee? And he took them to the AFC Championship game in 2021 where they were beat by the Chiefs, who ended up winning the Super Bowl. So this is a guy that has won before, disciplinarian, was a good player. Obviously, things fizzled out at the end for him, but I really like Vrabel. And then the last guy I want to mention, I know we've talked about it, is Brian Flores. I know some people are saying, you know, it's interesting because he has that lawsuit against the NFL, but Flores is a guy that I think has shown he deserves another shot. I thought he was a good coach in Miami. He was on staff with me when I was in New England. Guys respected him. Players loved him. I know there's that thing out there with Tua, but obviously, you know, make sure that relationship with Caleb would be good. But when he was playing in New England, the linebackers, he was linebackers coach. The linebackers loved this guy. Dante Hightower, one of my favorite best friends on the team at that time, loved Flo. Everybody loved Flo. He's a guy that players just look up to. When he talks, you listen. He's so incredibly smart. And with this Bears team, you don't have the dogs to run a defense where you don't mix things up. Like when I'm playing against a 4-3 cover 2, cover 3 team. Okay, I think what kind of players they have, because that's what it comes down to. They're not going to trick you. With Brian Flores, I feel like you can have a little bit lesser of a defensive players, right? Because he confuses you so much. I'm watching this film. Instead of focusing on the players, now I'm focusing on the scheme. Okay, he's showing those double mug looks. He's dropping 4, he's dropping 5, he's sending 6, he's sending 7. So he's a guy that I think can make your defense better just off of his scheme, even if you don't have the players. So those are my 3 guys for the vibe check. Ruthie, how about you? What you got for us?
Yeah, so my vibe check, like to give you a vibe, like my vibe is trying to be patient, right? This is going to be a minute. Like this is going to take a while, especially if guys like Ben Johnson or Brian Flores or Joe Brady are in the Super Bowl, right? Like some of those guys, you would hope that you're waiting to at least have second interviews with some of these guys who are going to be playing in that last game, because that means they're doing something right. So I just think there's going to be a lot of rumors, a lot of chatter, a lot of talk about all of this. I will say this. I was very much leaning toward the Mike Vrabel, the Brian Flores, the disciplinarian, Pete Carroll even, which we'll get into here. So I'll hold off on that. Yeah. But I was leaning more toward that because I just felt like there's so much to fix in terms of, and I know that we throw this word around culture like standpoint, but these guys need to know how to win. Like this locker room needs to learn how to win. What are your practice regimens? What are your, what are you doing when you go home at night? These are just things to be implemented into this Bears locker room. So I like the idea of having someone that's not afraid to hold people accountable, tell people when they're wrong, all those sorts of things. And after watching more Ben Johnson, I think the Bears game, when the stumble bumble and then seeing his mic'd up reaction, and then seeing the trick play against the 49ers on Monday night, and you see his reaction. And I know the cameras are finding him more often now because his name is the hottest name, right? So you're going to see more of that personality come through. And I'm just liking what I'm seeing from him. And I'm understanding and feeling more confident about this being a, sort of culture builder, leader personality. And so I'm excited to see what happens. Now, there was the Tom Pelissero report yesterday, Clay, that I thought was interesting, where he said, if there's a job on the market that Ben wants right now, it would probably be Chicago or something along those lines. I'm paraphrasing.
Yep.
The reason no one's talking about Jacksonville yet because the coach hasn't gotten fired yet. So I do think that there's going to be a discussion about the Jacksonville job and how that compares to the Bears job. And I took a lot of heat for this on the radio yesterday, and we'll talk about it more later. But that Jacksonville job is going to be very attractive for a lot of people in a smaller market, in an easier division, with a quarterback that's already developed. Right, you just got to hone it in, and a lot of resources financially. So I just think everyone's going to have to be patient and wait. And I also think that people need to understand that this may not be the most attractive job on the market at this time. So
absolutely, Ruthie. And you look at this Jacksonville roster, there's some players out there. You obviously you got Trevor Lawrence, Brian Thomas Jr. I mean, he's had over 1,000 yards. He's been by far and away, I think, better than Malik Neighbors. He's the number 1 rookie receiver in the league. Christian Kirk's injured. He's a guy that can play. He's a guy you could deal if you want to. They got a tight end, Evan Ingram. They got a running back, Travis Etienne Jr. They got some players out there. And Jacksonville is actually like a good city that really wants to win. And obviously people say they don't have a big fan base. They have good fans. And I look back, and to your point, you said, why would you want to go to this NFC North? And I know we're going to talk more about that, but this division is loaded. Yeah. Right. In the AFC South, I mean, you talk about dysfunction. You look at what the Colts got going on. You look at the Titans right now, not in a good situation. Will Levis, I mean, who are they even starting right now, quarterback? And then you look at, obviously, the Texans. And the Texans had a down year. C.J. Stroud had a down year. So that is a position that is a division where you look, if you go in and you get your team right, you could win that. And I go back to my own personal experience, and I was talking to you a little bit.
Clay, let me, I'm going to wait, and because I want you to tell that story a little later. So, because we're going to do a whole vibe check on the NFC North. So I want to talk about that a little bit too. And so just to wrap up my thoughts here real quick, I think what is really intriguing to me about this coaching search right now is how much longer we have to wait for this to happen. And then when you look at the guys like the Mike Vrabels and the Brian Flores, if they are going to try and win this job and take this job, who is your coordinator, right? That is the big question. And that's what they're going to have to answer for. So my vibe is I'm trying, probably not doing a great job at just being patient. Like, it's going to be a minute.
There's one more guy I wanted to mention, Ruthie, and I just because at first I wasn't very sold on him, but just what he's done down the stretch. Cliff Kingsbury. And I just wanted to mention that. You look at what Cliff Kingsbury did, and just looking up the last 4 games I knew were good. He's averaged 32 points over the last 4 games. And there's a thing where people say you can figure out that offense late in the season. They're going to the playoffs. They had a chance to win the division. Jane Daniels is going to be the rookie of the year. So I know Cliff Kingsbury got passed over for the offensive coordinator position, but he was a head coach before, obviously, in Arizona. He was a head coach in college. He's coached some really good quarterbacks. He does have that relationship with Caleb Williams, which I do think is a little bit overplayed because he wasn't even a coach. He was a consultant, right? So you can't obviously be a coach in that situation. But I think Cliff Kingsbury is a guy that's going to pick up steam, especially seeing what he's in the playoffs, how he does in the playoffs. But the offense has been looking good. They've won some good games. Jane Daniels is going to be the rookie of the year. So that's one more name that I think the Bears will have to look at.
The one thing that makes me a little nervous about Cliff Kingsbury is that he was a head coach and it didn't go well.
Yes.
So that's the only thing. Like, you look at Mike Vrabel, he had success. Brian Flores had success. Like, the former head coaches, you want to see, like, why didn't it go well in Arizona? And I have to do more. I'm sure there are a lot of things that happen in a situation like that. But, now you're seeing Kyler Murray have success without Cliff Kingsbury. So there's just a lot of questions I have about him. And obviously the fact that the Bears passed up on him for offensive coordinator makes me think that they would maybe be hesitant to interview him as a head coach, because it's like, oh, this is the Thomas Brown thing all over again. Like, why did you pass up all these guys that you're now giving these opportunities to? So that'll be interesting, but yeah, good stuff there. Okay. Another name that we didn't bring up, but I want to get your vibe check because his name has been circulating and I don't think we've had an opportunity to talk about it on this podcast yet. Yeah. What's your vibe check on Pete Carroll, Clay? I'll let you get some thoughts off your chest.
I mean, I know we talked about this in the Big Pro Football Show, and you and David bring up some valid points. Even if you can get this guy for 3 years, who are the Bears to turn down an opportunity for a coach like Pete Carroll, who has won a Super Bowl, who obviously did a good job with Russell Wilson, even though they were a defensive-led team there. My thing with Pete Carroll, awesome guy. I've had a chance to meet him on a couple different occasions. I took a pre-draft visit to Seattle when I was coming out in the draft. Got to sit down face to face with Pete Carroll, and he's a guy that you immediately gravitate towards, and you see how sincere and passionate he is, and he's got that love for the game, and he's got an unmatched energy for a 73-year-old man, but he is about to be 74, and here's my reservations. I want to coach. You look at the rest of the NFC North, I see Kevin O'Connell, what he's done with the Vikings, obviously Matt LaFleur, Dan Campbell. These are all young guys. They got their coach for a decade. Mm-hmm. I want to be a team that finds that coach for a decade, and I know we're not in a position to turn down great coaches, but with this job cycle, I think there are some good young candidates, and Pete Carroll is going to be 74. So I just don't know if he's going to have that longevity that I would want. He's a defensive-minded coach that doesn't call defense. He doesn't call offense. Obviously, he's had success as a head coach, but his last offensive coordinator hire also was Shane Waldron. That was his last guy, and obviously Shane Waldron did better things in Seattle than he did in Chicago, but that was still one of the reasons why Pete Carroll's no longer there. So those are my reservations, and I know you guys like Pete Carroll a little more than me, but it's just the age thing throws me off. Not an offensive-minded guy, doesn't have an awesome track record of hiring offensive coordinators either. So for me, those are my reservations why I wouldn't want Pete Carroll.
It's interesting. obviously you would imagine that the Bears called Pete Carroll to get his recommendation for Shane Waldron, right? Like there has to be an assumption that the Bears did their research on a candidate. So Pete Carroll obviously probably was a big fan. And when we spoke with one of the beat writers from Seattle a couple weeks ago, he said he wasn't the worst of the Seahawks offensive coordinators. So yeah. I don't know. It's interesting. Something didn't click here for Shane Waldron. So obviously that's unfortunate. But with Pete Carroll, my vibe check on this is like, I'm intrigued. Like I just sit down with him, talk to him, hear what he has to say. What are his ideas? What is his vision for Caleb Williams? I'm intrigued. And I think it's really, I think the Bill Belichick situation of him going to college almost like sets the precedent of like, you're never too old. Like age is just a number. And so maybe he's here for 5 years, maybe he's here for 3 years, maybe he's here for 5. And in the meantime, he's developing young coaches along the way who are maybe going to have an opportunity to take over for him when he's ready to hang it up. So
I wouldn't hate it. I mean, I wouldn't be upset if it happened. I would say, hey, this is a good situation. Pete Carroll has won. He's going to bring in his culture, his organization that has shown he can win. So I wouldn't hate it. I honestly wouldn't, but just the longevity thing.
It would be a headliner, that's for sure. I mean, obviously whoever the Bears hire, but it's an interesting thought, and to know that he's potentially intrigued in the job makes me think that, you know, he wants to take on the challenge, and I like that about what he's done and who he is. All right, let's move on. Let's get a little vibe check on a discussion that sort of re-entered the chat after Albert Breer's reporting the other day that there's some speculation that a potential head coach coming in would want to have alignment with a new with the general manager that he's being hired by or bringing with him. And that sparked another conversation that potentially Ryan Poles would be due for an extension if he has another year on his contract. People are discussing Ryan Poles getting an extension. Clay, what's your vibe check on a Poles extension?
It brings me back to what Kirk Herbstreit said. And he said, I mean, we should talk about some of the stuff that he said, because that was interesting during the whole broadcast. Obviously, he said that maybe Caleb needs to work on his preparation a little bit after he made the play. It's like, you can make these amazing plays when the ball hit the ground, he ended up throwing it, completing the pass, but he needs to prepare more. But he also said cycle of dysfunction, and that's been thrown around Chicago these last few days. And to me, if you hire a coach, 4-year deal, if it's Ben Johnson, maybe 5-year deal, Ryan Poles on the last year of his contract. So if you're a head coach, I feel like you would want to know there's going to be some stability there, that you're going to be working with the same people when you're trying to build this thing, and not have somebody come in with a new philosophy, starting over, building that relationship, figuring out what this guy likes, what you like. So for me, I mean, do you extend him? Do you fire him? And I don't know. I just don't think that the right way to do this is to do what you do with your head coach all the time. You draft a quarterback, then you fire your head coach, and now the quarterback's trying to figure out a new system. It's kind of like the same thing with a head coach. You're going to fire a GM, now he's working with a whole new guy. I know it's a little bit different, but for me, I feel like you need to have some stability there, whether it's a new GM or whether you extend them. And that's just me thinking if I'm Ben Johnson, if I'm going to be the coach of the Bears, I want to know the guy I'm going to be working with, the GM, filling out this roster, is going to be there, and I'm going to have some stability there. So that's my thoughts on it. And if they do decide to move on, there's some candidates. I mean, Ray Agnew, the assistant general manager for the Lions, Kansas City Chiefs assistant general manager, Mike Borgonzi. I mean, he's a guy. Bill's assistant general manager.
Dave Borgonzi's on the staff right now. Dave Borgonzi, his brother.
Oh, his brother. So see, Ruthie, we're just figuring things out right here. Yeah. So, I mean, there's some names out there. The Baltimore Ravens, Vice President of Player Personnel, George Kakinis. I don't know how to say his name, but just from my brief research, looking over some of these guys from these big organizations, there would be options out there, and some solid quality options from good organizations.
Clay, I just don't see them getting rid of Ryan. I don't see them firing Ryan Poles, because especially after the Albert Breer article, which is
he's point,
well sourced. Like someone at Hallis Hall is talking to him. So I just trust everything that he says.
And Schefter said on Waddle and Sylvie that he expects Ryan Poles to be the general manager into Schefter's plugged in as anybody.
Yeah, with Ryan Poles leading the search, and Kevin Warren will have a seat at the table. Like, that's what Albert Breer reported. And so I just don't see them moving on from him. And if that means in order to help, your pitch for this new head coach to say, you are aligned, the GM's not going anywhere, we're not going to bring in someone new that's going to want to bring in his head coach, I get it. If you want to extend Ryan Poles, it's very clear that you're not evaluating him on the current state of the roster. You're evaluating him on his hiring, and you're giving him another shot. That's what Kevin Warren sat at the podium and he said. So I'm under the impression that Ryan Poles is going to be here for the time being. I think he deserves another year and another opportunity to hire a coach and to continue to build the roster and beef up the trenches. But if that means that you're extending him, great. And if it doesn't go well, guess what? People get fired with years on their contract all the time. So it doesn't necessarily mean anything in a lot of ways.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that's something we're definitely going to have to look at and keep our eyes on, though, to see how they go about this Poles thing when you're bringing in a new head coach.
Right. All right. Let's get our vibe check on the division, the NFC North. With no Bears football this weekend, it feels like that Thursday night game was so long ago. Without any Bears football this past weekend, we had an opportunity to sit on Sunday and watch the Vikings and the Packers. And then on Monday night, we got to watch the Lions and the 49ers. What is your vibe check on the NFC North?
My vibe check is competitive. It's just a competitive vibe. And this division, I mean, you look at the game Sunday Night Football. This is the first matchup between two 13-win teams in NFL history, and they both have 14 wins. I mean, this is incredible. Like the Lions and the Vikings, this game, I mean, I cannot wait for it. Obviously, it's not the Bears. I was able to play for the Lions. I'm happy for the organization. Obviously, I'm a Bears fan at heart, but Dan Campbell, his culture, we think culture is the thing. It might be this elusive, esoteric word, just culture. What is culture? He has a culture. This game didn't mean anything for the Detroit Lions. He said, our guys are going to play, and we are going to play to win. They went out there. They played hard. They looked good, and that is a hard-nosed guy. And it's like you go back and forth. Should we play? Should we sit? I like what he's done there. Dan Campbell, my former tight end coach, is an incredible guy, has built that team. So the Lions, I think, are still my favorite. The Vikings, like, what are you going to do with Sam Darnold? Are you going to let him go? You got JJ McCarthy sitting there. Like, are you going to re-sign Darnold? He's going to get paid. Somebody's going to want him. He sat under Kyle Shanahan. That year for him, amazing. He's only 27 years old. Kevin O'Connell, you see what he was able to do with Kirk Cousins. Look how Kirk Cousins looked when he doesn't have Kevin O'Connell. These coaches get to bring the best out in their players. This Vikings offense, defense, so good. Brian Flores has done so many great things with this defense. And we can't forget the Packers. This is an 11-win team. I've never seen an 11-win team. They're the third in the division. Jordan Love hasn't thrown an interception since the last game against the Bears. I mean, this guy, like we said, once you start hearing Mariah Carey on the radio, all I want is Christmas is you, this guy just turns into a different player. So I think they're a threat too. Their defense looks good. Josh Jacobs, Tucker Kraft, one of my favorite tight ends that you've never heard of in the NFL. The guy can block, he can catch, he's a weapon. The receiving core, Christian Watson's out, but they got so much depth there. And Xavier McKinney, Jeff Hafley, and that defense has been showing up. So, I mean, that just shows you how competitive this division is and what the Bears need to do to be a team that can compete here. But the vibe check for the division, my one word would just be competitive. I mean, it's a battleground out there. All these teams look good. I'm excited to see how it goes with the playoffs for them. And Sunday, I mean, my popcorn's ready. It's already popped, Ruthie. I can't wait.
It's already popped. We might want to make a fresh batch. It'll be a little stale by then. Let's get my vibe check on the NFC North. My vibe check on the NFC North is scary. It's scary. And if you're a Bears fan, you're far away. You're far away from the top. And those three teams are not. Right? Like, those three teams all have a chance to be back there next year. I know you talked about some of the uncertainty when it comes to Sam Darnold, JJ McCarthy. What's going to happen? Is Brian Flores going to get a job? Is he going to leave? Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You have Kevin O'Connell. And like, I just have so much faith that he's going to be able to figure it out. And I don't know how you let Sam Darnold walk away. And I think that JJ McCarthy, because of the injuries that he was kind of rehabbing over the course of the year, it may benefit him to sit a couple more years, like a Jordan Love situation, or, you never know what may happen.
Yeah. The Jordan Love situation's perfect, Ruthie. NFC North too.
Yeah.
That worked out.
Yeah, sure did. And so I think that's really interesting with Green Bay. They're young, they're up and coming, they're only going to get better. And with the Lions, like, okay, maybe Ben Johnson leaves, but there's something there that's special right now. And they still have all the players, they still have all the talent, and they're going to be there for a minute. So I'm scared if I'm a Bears fan, because I know a lot of people say, oh, well, they almost beat the Lions. Like, okay, not really. Like there was a good matchup there for them at that moment in time, and it was a good time for the Bears to come across the Lions. But the Lions just went to town on the 49ers with a banged up defense. Like they're on like fifth stringers on defense, and they played their butts off against
Kirby Joseph
49ers team that there was nothing to play for.
No.
And they looked awesome. And they're going to be able to put up points against any team, any day, anytime, anywhere. So that's why, to tie this all kind of together here, Clay, like when you look at this as an opportunity as a potential head coach, you're climbing an uphill battle. Your roster is far away. Your quarterback is far away. Your entire situation is going to be tough.
Yeah.
You're in a huge market where this is a Bears town. All eyes on you. The pressure's on. The expectation for this coach to come in next year is to win now again, like they said last year it was. So if you don't meet those expectations, your job gets really hard in this city. So
I will push back one thing I want to say. I've been on some 4-win teams with the Jacksonville Jaguars. And when we were playing, we weren't that close in a lot of these games. We were getting blown out. We won 4 games. But the Bears we saw the beginning of the season, at least. Obviously, lately, it's just been dysfunction. I mean, Thomas Brown, terrible situation for him from obviously going from the passing game coordinator. You're not even running a meeting room to then you're the offensive coordinator. He wasn't even a position coach. Now you're the offensive coordinator, now the head coach. Okay, tough situation. But I'm in Jacksonville. We have these 4 or 5 win teams. We're not playing good teams tough. I think that's what's frustrating for Bears fans is you see them, they've played a lot of good teams tough. You go back to Washington, Green Bay.
Oh, for sure.
Detroit.
Early in the year, that I hear you, Clay, 100%. And that's, and again, I think Matt Eberflus gets a lot of credit for that because he held that locker room together and he disguised a lot of issues. Yeah. That I think are now being exposed when things fall apart. So this coach has to come and pick up the pieces and also like reestablish that sort of tough mentality. I mean, I know everyone always said hits principle and all, and people sort of made fun of that, but Flus's teams like played tough, like those tough defenses, tough teams. And he just didn't have, enough there. Yeah. So I think like this all being exposed with his absence is sort of exposing the roster, I think, in a lot of ways also, and also just kind of how far away they are from those teams at the top. And I know what you mean that they played them tough, but that feels like a century ago.
Yeah,
so,
it does.
So that's Clay. I want you to tell your story because I took a lot of heat on the radio for this yesterday, as I alluded to, like saying that like, who wants to come here? Like, who wants to come pick up this mess and be in this division and be in this city? It's probably the biggest sports town when it comes to an NFL team. New York, you have 2 teams, you're split. LA, you have 2 teams, you're split. Like this city is the 3rd largest market in the country and it's a Bears town. Like the microscope on you when you are the head coach of the Chicago Bears is like nothing in any other city. And there's a lot of pressure. There's going to be a lot of pressure to win now. And this division where you're seeing 2 teams with 14 wins, like in your own division, like the best teams in the NFL are in your division. Like it's a hard job. Now, we mentioned, a lot of people are not talking about the Jacksonville opening because the coach hasn't been fired yet. But I look at that as a very attractive opportunity for someone who wants to win now, who's got the quarterback already developed. Like, sure, there are probably some things to fix, but like, he is who he is. And you have really a lot of talent on that roster. The GM uncertainty there. So you may get to bring your own GM. Like, there's going to be a very appealing situation in Jacksonville. And I wanted to draw this comparison of like people saying, well, you're not a real competitor if you don't want to come and win here. It's like, okay, let me ask you, Bob, on your couch, if you had two jobs, one was maybe going to pay you more, but it was the same job, but one was just a little easier. Like, it was just a little easier to have more success. Same job, little easier to have success quicker in one job.
Yeah.
You're telling me you wouldn't take it over the other one? And so that to me is like, I get it. There's Caleb Williams and people want to see, and no one's sitting here saying he isn't going to be great. Like, I think that everything is there for him to be great. But like, there's going to be a situation in Jacksonville that I think is very appealing for someone like a Ben Johnson.
No, absolutely. And I'll give some more context. I'll tell my story, and I'll give some more context to why I think this Jacksonville job is so appealing. But like we were talking about, Ruthie, back when I was playing 4 years with the Eagles, I go to the Jaguars, 3 good years, right? I get offered a contract to stay in Jacksonville. But at the same time, I get offered a contract, same contract, to go to New England. So for me, I'm going back and forth. And I remember sitting down and talking with my agent. He's like, hey, okay, here's the deal. New England is New England. It's a tough roster. They got Rob Gronkowski. They just signed Martellus Bennett. They just drafted a tight end. And for me, looking at it back then, I was like, when you're an NFL player, you look in the mirror, you see the best tight end for me in the NFL. You see the best player. You're not, but in hindsight, looking back at that, when I went to New England, it was a tough roster. I got banged up a little bit. I ended up making the team, only lasted 6 games. I got released. Right, end up signing with the Lions. So looking back on it, for me, if I would have sat down to the pros and cons, this team that I have played with before, Jacksonville, much easier roster to make. And as players, you want to win, obviously, but also your career longevity matters. So looking back at that situation, easier roster, less pressure, not playing in New England, under the lights, you had a chance to kind of build something there. Looking back in hindsight, I think about this, often, obviously, I should have stayed in Jacksonville. Yeah, at the time, I want to go play with Tom Brady, Bill Belichick, Rob Gronkowski, want to win a Super Bowl. But in hindsight, sometimes you got to figure out what's the better situation for you. What's going to be the easier position for you to succeed? And for me, it was staying with the Jaguars. Made the wrong decision, went to the Patriots. Looking back, maybe I don't say I regret it, but it was a cool experience to play with Bill Belichick, Tom, and all those guys. But looking back, career-wise, longevity-wise, Jacksonville was the easier spot. I'm still going to work as hard. I'm still going to do everything I'm doing in the NFL. Better opportunity was Jacksonville. Same thing with you're looking at Ben Johnson. Jacksonville, easier division. Your owner is Shad Khan, who has buku bucks. He gives you whatever you need. Shad, you want something? Obviously, the McCaskies, they do well for themselves, but their business is the Chicago Bears. That's where they're making their money. Shad Khan created some part of car. I remember going to the meeting with Shad Khan. He goes, what kind of car do you drive? At that time, I was driving an Audi RS5.
Oh,
he goes,
nice.
he goes, you probably paid me $500 in parts for that, because he created these car parts. This guy is dumb rich. Every car you see on the road, he's getting money from that. He's got teams in soccer in Europe. He's got big 2-3 yachts. We'd go on yachts during Christmas time and invite the whole team on. So you got an owner that has his cash, that wants to invest, going to give you what you need. Trent Baalke, the GM of Jacksonville, he's going to be gone. You're going to be able to have a chance of bringing your own guy. You'll probably be able to bring in the assistant GM at Detroit right now, work with a guy you've worked with before, start something new there. We already talked about the roster for the Jaguars is actually solid. You have a quarterback that's set up now. Obviously, people talking about Trevor Lawrence, who he is, who he isn't, but you have a talented quarterback. So you brought up a valid point. It is much easier to go to the AFC South and win than it is in the NFC North. And I know I talked about my story. Looking back, I should have chose the Jaguars, and I think Ben Johnson's a guy that will definitely weigh all those options.
All right, great stuff, Clay. Before we go, I want to get your New Year's resolution for the Chicago Bears in 2025. What do they need to change in 2025?
Okay, I already talked about the GM a lot on the Big Pro Football Show, and we already covered that. It looks like Poles is staying, so I'm not going to say bring in a new GM. But for me, my New Year's resolution is get some stability up front, and I want a center, if you want to be specific. I was just looking at some of the old Bears centers, right? You look back at the history and of this position group, right? Since Roberto Garza career ended in 2014, the Bears week 1 starters at center: Will Montgomery, James Daniels, Cody Whitehair, who was good, Sam Musfer, Lucas Patrick, Coleman Shelton. Get a guy that's going to snap the ball. You won't have pressure in your quarterback's face. A smart center that can point the mic. He knows the protections, the schemes. Find a good center. That's my resolution. A guy that barks out the snap count. I mean, this is important. A nice center. Zach Frazier would have been a nice rookie young guy that was in the draft last year. I know I've talked about the Montez Sweat trade. Maybe you could have kept that pick, drafted Zach Frazier. Now you got your career center there, but that's neither here nor there. So for me, my resolution, Ruthie, find a good center. I don't care if it's in free agent, if it's in the draft. The draft doesn't look that deep right now. I know Alex Shapiro is going to do some deep dives into the draft, us as well, as we move towards the offseason. See if we can find a center in the draft. But that's what starts your offensive line as a player. I know how important the center is. You look at the Eagles, Jason Kelsey, they found another one in Cam Jurgens. It's why they have so much success running the ball between the tackles. Find your center.
Love it. Need a lot of help up front. I mean, both sides of the ball. The trenches just need a lot of work. So obviously you'll hopefully have Big Bill coming back next year. That'll be huge. But still a lot of work needs to be done there on both sides of the ball. Okay. Just to switch it up, because I agree with you, it's a great New Year's resolution. Another thing they need to resolve in 2025 is hire the right coach.
Yeah.
Hire the right coach. It's just not, I know, like I say, it's not that hard, but I just feel like I would know who the right coach is.
Yeah.
Do they want me to help? I don't know. I don't rush the process. Talk to people. Talk to a lot of people. You can never talk to too many people. I know they talked to a million offensive coordinators and still got that one wrong, but I want them to find a coach that's going to develop, it's going to call people out, that's going to control the messaging and the narrative about the team. Don't come in next year saying we're talking playoffs, we're going to take the North. Don't. This is going to be a challenge. Billy Donovan, I was talking about this from the Bulls. This offseason, before their preseason, it was media day. He had a press conference and he was like, this is going to be a rough year. He literally went out and said that. And I think everyone was sort of preparing all right, well, they could get the lot, they could get the pick, they could get the this. But now they're winning and everyone's kind of that's kind of surprising and fun, but are we happy about it? Are we not happy about it? Should they compete? There's a lot of let the fan base, let the media, let everyone be surprised by your success if it comes. Yeah. And if not, then there's no expectations that you didn't meet. That's something I know you observed firsthand in New England. I covered the Patriots. No one better at messaging than the New England Patriots. And all these players on their podcasts and the radio and that they're all saying things that get taken out of context and it says all this. It's there's a very easy way to streamline the information and to say, here's the message this week. And we don't want to be on headlines. We don't want to do this. Yeah. And obviously that's not great for us as media because we thrive off that. But, but I just think there's a way to control, to still be very vocal and express how you feel and be a player in the media. I love this about I just feel we get to know the guys so much better, but there's a way to do it in a way that doesn't hurt the team. And I think a head coach can really kind of lock that all in if you hire the right guy.
Yeah, and you saw when the Vikings waited versus when the Bears hired Eberflus. The Vikings waited 20 days after the Bears. They got Kevin O'Connell. You don't have to rush into this, and obviously it's going to be slow because of the Ben Johnson deal, but take your time. Find your guy. Like it's you don't get anything from rushing this process. Like 100%, Ruthie. I mean, that is such a valid point. And like you said, we've seen what Kevin O'Connell has been able to do with the Vikings, with his quarterbacks, and that's what we want. So,
yeah. All right. Great stuff, Clay Harbor. This is the Charter Podcast, and it was a fun one on this New Year's Day. Happy 2025 to everyone listening, and we will be back on Friday, hopefully with a little game preview situation. We
Packers week. Let's go.
Packers week. Woohoo. Last week of one more game. It's going to be fascinating. I am very
11 game losing streak to the Packers, 10-game losing streak, obviously, for the team, but 11 games of the Packers, like you still got a chance to beat the Packers. I mean, that's always something to look forward to. And I know we'll have more for everybody on Friday here, but I mean, hey, it's still exciting. Bears, Packers. I'm still looking forward to this game.
About to be 12.
Yeah.
Just kidding. Well, we'll see. We'll see how this week goes. I'm interested to hear what the players and what the coaches sound like. Obviously, we heard from Cole Kmet on Monday. That sounded like an end of the year press conference to me.
Yeah.
There was nothing that I took from that being like, oh yeah, these guys are going to be locked in this week, like trying to beat the Packers. Like that's not really where their heads are. And I understand. I think that's hard at this point, especially for someone like Cole Kmet, who's just exhausted by everything. But we'll see. We'll talk more about it on Friday for sure. So anyways, Clay Harbor, great stuff. I'm Ruthie Polinsky. This is the Charter Podcast brought to you by St. Xavier University. We'll see you on Friday.